All right, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Retirement Readiness, Planning for the Next Phase. My name is Tim Hilterman, Certified Financial Planner and Chief Financial Planning Officer here at Whitaker-Myers. I'm joined by our Co-Chief Investment Officer, also Certified Financial Planner, John Mark. The letters behind your name go on, but what do you like to be called these days?
The guy that has no personal hobbies. So all he does is study retirement planning.
Well, you got to find something better to do with your time, or maybe for our clients, it's good that you don't have any other hobbies because you love to get all of that. Well, a lot of John Mark's knowledge is going to come out in this webinar. So whether you're 5 years away from retirement, you're already retired, or just finally getting serious about retirement planning, this webinar is for you, helping you feel confident and prepared. And over the next hour, we're going to cover some of the most important steps you can take to secure the next phase of your life. So let's get into it. And a couple points of clarification here. We want to do a lot of Q&As today. We have some pre-submitted questions, but if you have questions, we would love to hear them and talk about them. You can submit questions using the Q&A section in your webinar there. If you'd like to submit them anonymously, please do so. There's a little button that says Ask Anonymously. So fill out your question, submit your questions so that we can talk about them. And I've done this before. I'm going to share my screen here and ask you to take about 5 seconds and visit our YouTube channel. We have spent a lot of time and effort beefing up content for you on our YouTube channel, and I don't want you to miss it. So visit our YouTube channel and make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. There's a subscribe button right here in the middle. If you're not subscribed already, hit subscribe there. You'll find weekly videos by our other Co-Chief Investment Officer, Samit Puri. Myself, I lead a video called Your Financial Journey, and many, many other videos there. So please take a second, subscribe to our channel so you are the first to see our great content. Well, John Mark, as we dive in here, a lot of people planning for retirement are asking the same big questions. Do I have enough saved? In other words, what is my number? How do I make sure I don't run out of money? Or how do I make sure my spouse is taken care of if I pass away? And for others, they have enough, right, John Mark? So what are some of the questions other people are asking if they're not asking, do I have enough money? What might people be thinking as they approach or they're in retirement?
Yeah, if you followed Dave Ramsey's principles a lot of your life, which are God's and Grandma's principles, really, you're in a situation where more than likely you've done a pretty good job of saving, and the retirement step is not scary to you. It's not really a big change. And to your point, Tim, as we're going to talk about withdrawal rates and all these sort of things, you're probably looking pretty good. And so then it becomes, how do I be a good steward of the asset? How do I manage it well? How do I do smart things with my money? All the things that when Vanguard did their seminal Advisor Alpha study, the study that says what kind of value does a financial advisor add to you, they were not about, oh, this person is so smart, they pick all the right investments at all the right time. As you and I both know, that is a fool's errand. It's impossible to do that. The one person we thought that did it well died of kidney failure in a North Carolina prison just a few short years ago. And that, of course, was Bernie Madoff, the one person we thought had it all figured out, yet didn't have it figured out at all. Warren Buffett made most of his net worth, the guru, the mecca of investors, after he turned 80. So investing isn't really there. It's things like this, Tim. It's what are tax smart strategies that I should think about or know about to minimize my lifetime tax burden. We have a CPA and we have enrolled agents on staff to help clients do their taxes. And many times those CPAs, Tim, can be all about how do I save taxes today, right now. And we say, ooh, as a financial planner, as a certified financial planner, that makes me skimmish a little bit. I don't want to just save taxes today. I do want to be smart and do smart things and save taxes if taxes are there for me to save. Tax avoidance is one of the things as a tax preparer that the IRS teaches us. Tax evasion, of course, is something they don't teach us. That's very bad. But as a financial planner, putting that with tax savings together says I actually want to minimize my clients' lifetime. That's the key word, Tim. Lifetime tax burden. And many of the pre-submitted questions that we have submitted to this webinar were all about what is the optimal time to convert to my Roth IRA. That's a question we're going to talk about today. What do I want to do with my money? Mm-hmm. If it's not going to be spent for my lifestyle, what should I do with it? And maybe the answer to that is, am I able to give more than I ever thought? Am I able to be a gospel patron? Am I able to make a kingdom impact? How can I support my kids and grandkids if I've got more than I need? How do I do that in a friendly way, in a tax-friendly way, in a gift estate planning friendly way? And maybe some deeper questions around what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered for? Or in 30 years, how do you want your name to be thought of there? And then finally, am I going to have such a high net worth that I need to deal with estate taxes? That's something that some people have to think about. So those are some things that maybe I'm not worried about. Do I have enough? But I should be worried about, am I managing it well in retirement? And those are questions we'll try to dig into today, Tim.
Yeah. And when it comes to retirement planning, when we ask the question, am I ready? Well, there's so much that goes into it, isn't there, John Mark? There's all the different income sources, there all the types of investments, types of investment accounts. There's so much that goes into it. Every case is so unique to each person. So obviously, we can answer general questions here. We can give general principles. Where the rubber meets the road is, what is your situation like? How much are you collecting in Social Security? What's your income level? What tax bracket are you in? It all depends. So it's very case sensitive, but we're going to give you as much power here, as much information to help wet your whistle. And then we'd obviously be more than happy to connect with you as we go on. Well, John Mark, before we dive in to the specifics and kind of getting into the nitty gritty, I want to back up and just describe in general, what does retirement really mean these days? And from your perspective, in the last 10 to 20 years, how has it changed? How have you seen people change from viewing retirement, am I ready to retire, versus today and some of the nuances that come out there?
Well, Tim, everything's cyclical. And when I started back in 2007, I think that people were ready to retire, but they were fearful because they had just gone through this tech bubble that had rocked the stock market in 2001. And of course, 9/11 exacerbated that. And they were a little fearful. And then 2008 came around and everybody saw their assets, at least the stock side of their assets, drop 50%. And it then reiterated some of the fears that people had in their mind that, yeah, I can't retire and I shouldn't retire because I can't count on the stock market. I can't count on my assets growing. I can't count on these sort of things. And so it just kept delaying retirement. And now we've gone through a 15-year, nearly, a little over, bull market where, yes, we've had some drops. We, of course, had the COVID drop, which was pretty significant, nearly 35%. We had 2022, which was the worst year for bonds, your safer investments since 1842. You had the Brexit in the early 2010s. And so you have had these crashes, but nothing that have been extreme, and the extreme ones have recovered pretty quick. And so now I think there's a little more less fear about going from the stock market perspective, on top of the fact that in 2017 we had a tax regimen that would just totally got flipped on its head, in a good way, we'd say. But now tax planning in retirement is a lot more important. And so it's always, the ebbs and flows of how well has the stock market done recently is going to be in people's minds as it relates to their fear or whatnot of talking about retirement. Taxes are always going to be something that's important there. Of course, health insurance, we're going to dive into that a little bit today, has totally changed. Pretty much, if you weren't uber wealthy 10 years ago, it was hard to retire before 65 because you just really didn't know what your health insurance situation is going to look like. That's totally changed. There's things that change. This is why we would say it's important that when you think about your partner as it relates to retirement planning, and your partner meaning your financial advisor, you want to make sure that they are constantly educated. Constantly educated. This is a world that in 10 years, the retirement picture is going to look totally different, and we can almost guarantee that.
Yeah, I I was just considering a couple years ago, even as early as last year, like you referenced 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, how that changed the tax landscape. It doubled the standard deduction, it doubled the estate planning tax exemption. All of these things changed and really eased up a lot of financial areas in our lives. But there's the possibility, if they didn't pass this one big beautiful bill act, possibility of everything reverting back. And depending on the election, depending on the Congress, tax brackets can change, our tax situation can change, the estate tax exemption can drop dramatically. So you have to be ready. You have to be ready to move with the change in law, change in structure. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think recency bias can be something that creeps into all of us, as you're saying. The market, let's be honest, over the last 10 years, almost 15 years, the market's been doing really well. We've had some bumps in the roads, 2020, 2020, 22. But for the most part, if you're invested in like the S&P 500, for example, it's performed. And the nature of that, it doesn't always happen. So work with a financial planner, do some planning, get your pieces in place. We're going to talk about diversification, asset allocation. Make sure you're ready for the next dip in the road and set up for a confident, capable retirement. Well, let's jump in here, John Mark. When I think about retirement planning, I like to come back to the basics, and I think that's really important. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself without forgetting some of these basics. And when we say basics, we love our friend Dave Ramsey. It's that first baby step, 1, 2, 3. So basics, emergency fund. John Mark, somebody retiring, do you recommend them still continuing an emergency fund? And if so, how much?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's, ultimately, you are going to have emergencies regardless of your retirement or employment situation. Murphy's Law doesn't care what is the paycheck structure, whether it's coming through. So certainly that's something that we would recommend. Typically that gets a little bit higher for retirees. And this is where you want to not be too aggressive with your emergency fund. You don't want to let it get too much. So use the Dave Ramsey principles. Use baby step 3 as your principle, 3 to 6 months, and say, okay, you're in retirement. Be closer to that 6 month if you're a little more worried about the fact that you don't have a paycheck that's from an employer anymore coming into the household. And of course, keep those in your high yield savings accounts. Don't play games with these local banks, and we could list them, but we won't, probably for purposes of not getting hated on, that play games with your emergency fund or your savings account that pay you 0.2, or we'll give you 4% for a while if you bring us new money, and then we'll drop it back down to 0.2 and hope you never remember that it didn't drop down to 0.2. Go to a bank that is always good, that's always aggressive with their rates. You can find them very easily. Bankrate.com is a very good place to go, where you'll find FDIC insured bank accounts that get you emergency funds that are sufficiently paying a competitive interest rate. And the good news is, for 15 years that was zero-ish, and today it's 4-ish, 3.5%, going down because we know rates are going down. But certainly something that can not change your retirement trajectory, but add a little more juice for the squeeze. Maybe it's another special night out with your spouse because you earned on your $30,000 an extra $1,000 this year in interest.
Yeah, there's this nuance, isn't it? With if you think about the guaranteed rates that are out there, like you said, for many, many years, that guarantee rate, your checking account was paying you 0.001%. I mean, nothing. It literally was paying you nothing. And then all of a sudden, back in what 2021, end of 21 into 22, rates started shooting up. In fact, your CD rates out there, your short-term treasuries were paying, what was the high water mark recently? Pushing 6%, right there. And so you might think, oh, this is great. I'm going to move all of my money into my money market because it's paying me 5%, and you're happy with that because it's a decent interest rate. But the problem is, the only reason rates are that high is because inflation is raging out of control. So we saw inflation hit, 9%, in that same time period. So the equation is, well, yeah, you're making 5% or 6%, but inflation's at 6%. You're not getting ahead there. But that's not what's important with your emergency fund. Dave Ramsey's very clear about that. Your emergency fund, you're giving up some of the opportunity there in that emergency fund to make interest, make a rate of return, for the ability to have cash there when you need it. And I think increasing your emergency fund when you're approaching retirement or in retirement isn't a bad idea if you are risk averse, or if you just feel a little uncomfortable and you want to let that go up a little bit. So yeah, keep and build a strong emergency fund heading into retirement. Well, next subject is your budget. Dave Ramsey's really big on knowing your budget. So where does budget come into play when you're talking with your clients about retirement planning?
Tim, that might be everything in retirement. Is what does it take to run your life? What do you need so that you can do the things you want to do, have the retirement lifestyle you want to have? And that is correlated to the lifestyle you had before retirement, we would argue. Certainly there's some things that you have more time now, so you're going to be dedicated to, that could be dedicated to traveling or other things. But the reality is your lifestyle generally is not going to become dramatically different than retirement. So, baby step 2, Tim, is pay off my debt using the debt snowball. And oftentimes I'll remind clients, retirement is a basic equation. It's making your income, which is changing because it's coming now from pension, Social Security, annuities, investments, all these different things, equal your expenses. Now, when I work on my expenses, I don't view that as doing retirement planning, but I'm doing retirement planning. When I lower my expenses because I pay off debt, because I pay off my mortgage, and like I would in baby step 6, that is doing retirement planning. It means that it takes less income to run my lifestyle. So bar none, we would say paying off your debt is a very, very important proposition before you retire. The happiest retirees, based on a book from my friend Wes Moss, said the happiest retirees had their house paid off and their debts paid off. So if you want to be like the happiest retirees, based on his study, which was pretty exhaustive, you want to have your debt paid off. If you want to be like, the Proverbs retiree, you want to have your debt pay off. Now, when you think about monthly expenses, Tim, what do I actually need? Well, this is where at Whitaker-Myers, we have developed a formula that is not necessarily unique to us. We would say probably most good financial planners do it, where we would say, okay, well, when you think about your income today, what happens to your income today? Well, a couple things. Right off the bat, you are probably, hopefully, at the top of your budget giving. That's going to maintain itself in retirement. It may change a little bit, but we would argue we want to maintain that level of giving you had while you were still working. The second thing is taxes. You have to pay your taxes, but that is going to totally change. What kind of tax rate you're going to pay is going to be extremely different in retirement. And it's correlated to how did you build your balance sheet? How did you build your baby step 4, your retirement plan? The more variation you had with that, the more Roth and other pre-tax and maybe some non-retirement, as Dave would call it, bridge accounts you have, the more you're going to be able to flex the tax muscle and get your tax rate very, very low. But taxes are going to be totally different. Your savings that you do for retirement, are you going to need to do that in retirement now, Tim? I don't think so, unless you're a kind of weird person that still wants to save in retirement, which, by the way, there are those people out there, but that's going to go away. Things like your debts, as we just talked about, should go away. your property taxes, the maintenance on your property, that's going to stay, right? So even once you pay off your mortgage, you've still got to pay the property tax. You've still got to maintain the property. Your health insurance that you have in work, that's going to be slightly different. So that's something you want to itemize. And then if you round all those up that I just talked through, Tim, your savings, your taxes, your debt payments, all those things, and you subtract all that, what's kind of left in a very basic way? What's left is what's left, meaning what you spend. If you back out your savings, you back out your taxes, you back out your property insurance, you back out any debt payments that be gone in retirement, what's left is what you have to spend for your lifestyle. And that's a number that is very important to the retirement planning process, because it really helps us then determine, based on Social Security, pensions, annuities you might have, what does your balance sheet need to look like for you to be given the green light to retire. So if anything, Tim, you want to be on a budget so that you can be on purpose with your dollars, you can have a plan for them, and you can have a much more defined retirement planning picture and not be guessing on those numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think anyone can benefit from tracking their expenses, right? I mean, whether you have $2 million, $5 million, 500,000, as you approach, even as you're in retirement, developing a budget, and it doesn't have to be complicated. I suggest people at least a year before they retire just start tracking their monthly expenses. And it doesn't have to be sophisticated. They don't have to get all of their receipts gathered together and have a big sit down with their spouse and say, well, you spent this and that wasn't allowed or whatnot. No, just get a general idea of what you spend so that you can have confidence on what you're going to spend in retirement. And if you're in the situation where you have more money than expenses as far as your income right now, well, that's wonderful. And you can project out what you want to do and what you want to accomplish in retirement. So it just gives you confidence when it comes from that. And by the way, if you are struggling with making a budget, we have a coaching team here at Whitaker-Myers that can help you with that. It's their passion to help you develop your budget and help you through things like that. All right. Well, you mentioned something, and I want to kind of dive into it. Health insurance. Talk to me about the scenario when you have somebody retiring before Medicare or somebody after 65 or older after Medicare. What are the differences in pictures there, and what do people have to plan for, and what do you recommend planning for health insurance?
Well, Tim, like I told you, this is one of the things that has been the biggest changes over my career so far, has been health insurance. Again, 10 years ago, we'd say, oh boy, if you're not 65, are you sure you want to take that risk of, are you going to be able to get health insurance? Are you going to qualify? And if you can't, I mean, that's one of the leading causes of bankruptcy is medical debt. And it's just a risky proposition. And once you get to 65, you're on Medicare, and then that's a guaranteed issue, so we're okay. But pre-65, it was dicey, and that's where things like Christian healthcare ministries and other medical sharing options came into play. Today, there's no pre-existing issues, so everyone can get coverage generally, and the cost of coverage is expensive, as you would expect it to be. Maybe a couple $1,000s a month to buy health insurance. However, the way we determine what you pay, Tim, is based on the one thing we always look at, we as the government look at to determine, are you wealthy? Not the true indication of wealth, which is, do we look at your net worth, but we look at your 1040, your tax return, and we say, well, what does your income look like? And if your income's really high, we say, well, you can afford to pay health insurance, so thus you're going to pay the full cost. And if your income's really low, we don't think you can afford to pay health insurance, so the government subsidizes your cost down to in some cases, mere $100 monthly premium, maybe even less than that I've seen sometimes. So the reality of what you're going to pay for health insurance before 65 is going to be based on something called premium tax credits, and that's going to be based on your income, which can be legally manipulated if you've done a good job, as we've talked about earlier, of building pre-tax, Roth, and bridge account non-retirement investments. Of course, once you get to 65, then you get to go on Medicare, and that's where everyone gets Part A, that's free. Everyone gets Part B, and that's generally at this point about $180 a month, a little over that. And then you get to pick what sort of add-on do you want, for lack of a better term. Now we have a team that helps with this, Tim, and that's because it's really, it can get complicated. It can really be nichey to a person's health situation. But let me give a general piece of a general thought here as it relates to health insurance when you're on Medicare. You can go for the low monthly premium options, which are generally Medicare Advantage plans. But then as we try to predict your cost over your lifetime, it gets very unpredictable for us for what your out-of-pocket cost might look like. Where if you go for the more expensive monthly cost of a Medicare supplement plan, maybe a Part G or Part N, you're going to pay more. Now your out-of-pocket costs, especially for hospitalization and doctor's visits, starts to become a lot more plannable. And so that'd be our general thing for you to think through is, do you want the unpredictability, the lower cost, especially if you've saved well, the lower cost with the unpredictability of, I got cancer, heart attack, stroke, or do you want the higher cost with the predictability? We would generally say things that are predictable are easier to plan around. And so those are things you want to consider. But the good news, Tim, as of right now, getting health insurance before 65 is very doable. Now, there is something that is being very heavily debated in the political circle right now on should those premium tax credits, those things that bring the cost down for the pre-65 retiree, should those be allowed to stay? And we don't have clarity on that yet, so we really don't know. Is it going to stay? Is it going to go? We just don't know. So that's why you would be wise to, as you mentioned, tune into our YouTube channel, because once we get clarity on that, you can bet your bottom dollar we're going to talk about that. We're going to blog about that, and we're going to talk about that because it is everything for the pre-65 retiree.
Absolutely. And then one thing you alluded to, once you hit 65, you still have to watch out for your adjusted gross income creeping up too high, because if it does, say if you're single and it's over, I think it's 106,000 now, and if married you're over 212, I believe it is, then the dreaded IRMA starts creeping in. IRMA, income related monthly adjustment amount, and that can get you. And some people have done these wildly large Roth conversions and all these things, and they didn't realize, and then IRMA creeps up. Well, it's based on 2 years of previous tax return. So 2 years later, all of a sudden they're paying an extra, $300 a month on their Medicare Part B premiums, not to mention Part D. They got some there. So you just have to be aware. You have to be up to speed with the tax code, and working with a professional helps sometimes. All right, let's keep this moving. We talked about emergency funds, budget. There was a question in here, and he said, should the emergency fund go in a high yield savings? When it comes to that amount of money, hopefully in regards to your net worth, it's not going to make a huge difference. So some emergency fund in your checking account, I like to say keep 15 to 20 in your checking account if in relation to your net worth or your income, and then throw the rest into maybe a CD. A CD is a great place to throw extra savings right now. CDs you can get a little over 4% at your local bank, and then keep that as long as you have that emergency fund. Then get the rest of your dollars working for you, and we'll talk about that here. In fact, I kind of want to branch into that subject, John Mark, the subject of asset allocation. And there's a lot of popularity with target date funds right now in your 401ks and things that automatically ratchet you from very aggressive. And when we say very aggressive, we're talking about 100% stock to something a little bit more conservative, and adding in some of the bonds there, or income producing vehicles, if you will. So when should you start making these adjustments in your asset allocation, going from extremely risky to either extremely conservative, or where should you land, and what should be the adjustments along the way?
Yeah, that's a great, maybe one of the seminal questions in retirement planning. And maybe we should start out with, asset allocation is that $10 word to explain that $2 concept of how should you spread your money out? How should you invest your money uh, when you get into retirement? Many of you probably have target date funds available in your 401k. You know how you know if you have a target date fund, Tim? Look at the fund, and if it's got a year on the end of it, that's a target date fund. These were very popular, and still are very popular inventions to really help people that didn't know how to invest their money, but they knew when they wanted to retire. Said, well, let the mutual fund company determine how to spread the money out, how much to put into stocks, how much to put into safe investments, maybe put some in real estate, maybe put some in gold, just spread it out to a lot of different things for people. Well, the one argument we would make against target date funds, why we'd say it's good to have your financial advisor look at your 401k and say, what options are available to me? And should I individually select as opposed to just defaulting myself into the target date fund, which, by the way, Tim, is much better than if I just said I'm going to default into the money market or into a savings account option, which was the case with a lot of people, unfortunately, prior to target date funds, is they never got any growth on their investments. But the one thing you could pick on with them, of maybe a few things, is for a 30-year-old, they would still have some percent of the money, maybe 10% of it, in safer investments, in slower growing, things that don't go up and down like stocks do. And I actually had the opportunity to talk with in Chicago about a year ago to the day, it was last fall, probably the preeminent writer in retirement planning today, Christine Benz. Christine Benz works for Morningstar. If you Google her, you could Google her right now, Benz. What you'll see is she is the top of the food chain as it relates to retirement planning. She's very good. You would do well to read her content and to listen to what she has to say. She's very smart. But I asked her, I said, Christine, help me understand why a 30-year-old in a target date fund needs some level of their investments in safer assets. Is it because all of them are so worried about the stock market that they just need to put 10% in there to bring down the ups and downs of the portfolio? Because it's costing them growth generally. If the economy grows and the stock market grows, having 10% of my money in safer investments when I'm 30, and I'm not going to need this money for another 30, 35 years if I'm going to retire around 65, what value did that bring me other than, again, bringing down the ups and downs a little bit? And then when I'm 40, same question, and maybe even 50s, depending on my risk tolerance. And she said, John Mark, I can't give you a good answer as to why that would be the case. But I will tell you this is why some people have financial advisors to help answer that question for them individually. Now, we wrote an article, and it was probably, and still is, the most popular article our website's ever seen when we track how people find us and Google and all those sort of things. It's the one that constantly gets found by Google, and it's called Bear Markets Normal but Not Fun. And in that article, we looked at every time the stock market dropped 20% or more, and then when it recovered, which, by the way, Tim, do you know how many times it's recovered fully? I'll give you an answer. It's 100%.
All of them.
All of them, yes. And we were particular. So the fact that it always recovers was not what we were looking at, and we weren't trying to make that point, Tim. The point we were trying to make is how many days on average did it take to get to the bottom of a stock market? Those of us that are in our 40s will remember the commercial when we were watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on TV or the Berenstain Bears or whatever we were into. There would be a little owl that would come on TV, and he would take out a Tootsie Pop, and he'd say, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? 1, 2, crunch. It was always 3. And that's kind of the question we were asking for retirement planning is, how many days does it take to get to the bottom of a bad stock market, or, to use a $10 word, a bear market, when the stock market gets 20% or worse? So we looked at every single one of them going back to 1950. And it was about 330 days was the average time it took to get to the bottom of a stock market. Then just as important, how many days did it take to get back to where you were? How many days did it take to get back to the break-even point, which, as we just mentioned, always happens. and that was 603 days, which is about 1.7 years. So the entire cycle of a down to back to where you were on average, and you have to be careful with averages because you could get trapped into a longer than average period of time. So don't just always play the averages, but the average was 3 years. And so when you start thinking about when should I start pulling the risk back, well, that is partly based on your tolerance for risk. How aggressive or conservative am I as an investor? But part of it should also be historically, how close am I to retirement and how could a bad stock market impact that? Because if I'm in a negative period of time and I haven't hedged any of my investments, I haven't made any of them safer, guess what ends up happening, Tim? You start doing, instead of positive compound interest, you start doing negative compound interest. And negative compound interest is the thing you have to avoid or you will run out of money. It's very simple. If I start taking money out on a 10, 20, 30% dip, I'm going to run out of money. So does it mean when the stock market's bad, I don't take that money out for those average of 3 years? Well, of course, that wouldn't work very well for most people. They couldn't live without that extra income for 3 years. So no, that's where you want to start thinking about, should I start making some of the investments safer? So generally, Tim, our general advice would be to say, you better look at that at least 5 years, but maybe before then, but at least 5 years, because if you think about a 2008 scenario, which was the seminal moment that you and I both grew up in as financial advisors, where we cut our teeth a little bit here, it was 1 year down and it was about 4 years back up. And so during that period of time, if you hadn't hedged your investments, you were in trouble. Now, an interesting fact that I often quote to people is the stock market at its worst was in the 50% decline during the 2008 period of time. Safer investments that year had a return of +5 on average. They actually were up 7. And then when things started getting bad with Lehman Brothers and we started to just really fall into an abyss that seemed to never end, they dropped 2% to down 5.
Yeah.
So, Ecclesiastes 11:2 says it best. Divide your portion to 7, yes, even to 8, because you don't know what calamity may come on the earth. And while you and I are optimistic people about the market, we don't know what October of 2025 is going to bring for the market.
Right. That's right. And there's an interesting balance. And I think working with a professional helps you to vet this out, because on the one hand, some can get overly optimistic and say, hey, look at the stock market. Look what it's done over the last 10 and 15 years. We just keep putting money into it and it keeps going up. Others can be maybe a little too pessimistic for their own good, perhaps, saying, oh, look at everything that's happening in the world. We have wars, we have tariffs, we have, you name it. I'm scared. It's, the stock market's rigged, that type of stuff. And you're overly pessimistic, and you might, be sitting on cold hard cash, in your vault at home. Well, you have to have a mix of that. You have to be prepared for today, for the next couple months. You have to have your emergency fund. You have to, like you're pointing out exactly, John Mark, have things in more stable investments to get you through the worst case scenario, in that a possibility, not maybe probability, but that's a possibility. We don't know when the next recession is going to happen, but guess what? There's going to be a next recession, and you should be prepared for it. You should be fearful. At the same time, remember, John Mark, even when you're retiring, if you're retiring at 65, a portion of your funds, maybe a lot of your funds, are long-term, aren't they? You are a long-term investor at retirement, or at least a portion of your funds are. So you have the time to ride out that bear market, to take some more risk. And this all comes back to an interaction of your goals, your assets, and you said this before, your personal risk tolerance. So if you're sitting on an all stock portfolio right now, and let's just say your account's worth 500,000 combined, and you think to yourself, what would happen if my account dropped by 20% and it went down to 400,000? How would I feel about that? And if you said that would freak me out, then that's an indication that your risk tolerance is not matching your current asset allocation, you need to just review that and make sure you're ready. That's one thing. I don't struggle with this at all, but Dave Ramsey gives some great advice. And he says, stick with growth and income, aggressive growth, international. Those are all stocks, by the way. And he doesn't have the privilege of sitting across the table from that person. It might be a 70-year-old. To your point, like you said, if the 2008 scenario happened in October or next year, they would have to sell at some point, and you have to set yourself up to be able to handle that worst case scenario. Well, let's keep things moving here. Apologize for rambling on. John Mark and I get excited about this type of stuff. This webinar could probably go on for about 4 hours tonight, but we'll keep it to an hour. Submit those questions. Make sure to hit ask anonymously if you don't want your name out there. And we'd love to answer those, as many as we can here in a couple minutes.
Tim,
John
one
Mark,
thing if I could say one thing to the how do I spread money out? I spent a lot of time reading a lot of stuff from Bill Bengen. He's the author and creator of the 4% rule, which if you actually hear him speak, he says that it shouldn't be the 4% rule. It actually should be the 7% rule. And we could get into why it should be the 7 versus the 4. But he says, hey, in retirement planning, when you spread your money out, like we just talked about, you have different sort of investments that even the growth and income, aggressive growth, international, there's only 4 free lunches in his opinion as it relates to retirement planning. 4 free lunches. One of the free lunches is rebalancing, which is to say, if you have a systematic way of rebalancing, which is when we're in periods like we are right now, where the stock market's doing really well. So you have Oracle that last week or 2 weeks ago has a 50% up day in one day. And you have NVIDIA that has doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled. And you know how you get a free lunch as it relates to investing? You rebalance. You take the gains. That doesn't mean you get completely out of NVIDIA. It doesn't mean you completely sell Oracle if that's an investment you have. But you take those gains when you're given them and you recalibrate to the safer side of the portfolio. And vice versa, when the stock market drops, you recalibrate that safer side in a little bit back to the stock side. And that has been one of the ways that in his worst case scenario where you're only able to take out 4%, where he's in his revised book, which is a great book, you can talk to your Whitaker-Myers financial advisor about it, where he's revised it up to 5%. The reason he's able to do that, Tim, is because of rebalancing. And that is such an important part of your spreading money out in retirement. It's not to set it and forget it then. Where money comes from and how you recalibrate it is such an important part of that. That's a hard thing for individual investors to do. For us, it's a very expensive software and it's a really good employee. Okay, actually a couple of employees that really help us do that very well. But that's one of the 4 free lunches. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the other free lunches that you get in retirement planning. But again, talk to your financial advisor about those if you want to learn more about the free lunches that you should absolutely be doing in retirement planning. But as it relates to that asset allocation, that's one of them, Tim.
Yep, that's great. Well, I have quite a bit of material here. I just want to talk very quickly. If you're still working, John Mark, and if you find yourself, or if we help you run your plan, you say, I feel like I'm a little behind, there are some opportunities, aren't there? There's some catch-up saving opportunities, and I'm just going to review these here real quick. So if you are still working, and you might say, well, Tim, how much do I need to save for retirement? Well, we can, first of all, run a plan for you and tell you exactly how much you need to be saving based on our projections to get to the number and help you understand when can you confidently retire. There was a pre-submitted question here that said, when is the best, or how can I determine when to retire? And what determines how much money I need? Well, I'd say it's a simple equation, but it's really kind of complex with our software. It's your current status, your net worth, and how much investments you have, your savings rate, how much you're projected to have at retirement, and then how much you can live off of in retirement. John Mark pointed out to the 4% and 5% rule, pulling out of your nest egg to supplement other income sources like Social Security and any pensions you have. and we can run all of those numbers for you. But let's just say you are not at retirement yet. You're approaching your 2, 3, 4, 5 years from retirement, and you think, oh, I need to do a better job at saving. Well, Dave says save at least 15%. That's the rule of thumb that we recommend. Save 15% of your gross wages into tax efficient vehicles. But if you have more money, you can save more than that. So in a 401k today, if you're under 50, you can save up to $23,500. But there's a couple catch-ups, isn't there, John Mark? So if you're over 50, or if you're 50 and over now, you can actually pump quite a bit of money into that 401k. How much is that today?
An extra 7,500.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So you can stuff up to $31,000 into your 401k, which I think is pretty impressive. But there's this weird, I don't know, do you understand this next weird rule if you're between 60 and 63? What's that all about?
I think the predominant answer for that, Tim, is most people in the U.S. Senate are between 60 and 63, so they were giving themselves a window of extra money into their retirement plans. But yeah, now it's not only like, hey, if you're over 50, but now it's like, well, if you're between 60 and 63, but if you're 64, no luck. But if you're between 60 and 63, you have an extra catch up that takes that 7,500 to 11,250. So you don't get both. Not the 11,250 and the 7,500. It's just your 7,500 goes to 11,250 if you're between 60 and 63.
Yeah, that's very strange, but there it is. And it's probably going to change, folks. Your IRAs, so your 401k, some people have a good grasp on this. Some people get confused. Your 401k maximum contribution amount is completely separate from your IRA or Roth IRA contribution limit. Now, the tax deductibility, there's a nuance there, so check the tax laws or consult your financial advisor. But if you have a traditional or Roth IRA, if you're under 50, you can put $7,000 a year. And if you're over 50, there's a little bit of a catch up. It's $8,000 a year. And I don't know, John Mark, have you run any monthly projections? If you wanted somebody to max out their Roth IRA on a monthly basis and they're 50 and over, what's the number on a monthly basis?
Oh, wow. That changes every year, so I'm going to have to get out my handy dandy calculator, but I'm
Well,
going
it's
to
not
say
pretty.
it's
It's
close
not pretty.
to well, let's round up. $667.
Yes. I like the rounding up there because the first time I did that, I said, this has to be all wrong. But unfortunately, it's $667 a month if you want to max that puppy out. I'm just going to skip ahead. For those of you with SIPO IRAs, things are a little bit different there. But going back to the priority before we jump into Q&As, priority of savings is we agree with Dave Ramsey. First, invest in your company retirement plan. Hopefully, it's a 401k and get up to what the company matches. So if they match 6%, you put 6% in that 401k. Next, go outside to your individual IRA or Roth IRAs and try to max that out. And if you're over the limit for a Roth contribution, consider a backdoor if that's appropriate for you. And there's some stipulations there. Work with a tax professional. Next, go back and max out that retirement plan. And we just talked about some of those beefy contribution limits. And then we do have quite a few people that say, I still have extra money. I have this bonus that I'm expecting, or I have income coming in. What do I do with it? Well, it can be invested too. We've utilized most of or all of the tax efficient savings vehicles, and there's nothing wrong with plowing that into a brokerage account, is it, John Mark?
No. We that's the third leg of the tax stool. Is you've got your pre-tax that is going to be taxed as you take it out unless you do it as a charitable gift after the age of 70. The Roth IRA is always going to come out tax-free, and the bridge account, as Dave would call it, the brokerage account, might come out tax-free and it might come out taxable. It really depends on what the rest of your income looks like, but generally for a lot of retirees, there's a path to making it come out tax-free.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to transition here. Roth conversions seem to be a hot topic these days, and I'm thankful John Mark, because I am all about Roth. I'm all about Roth. The reason I love Roth so much is that once those funds are in there, whether you're putting funds right into a Roth or you're converting and getting them over to a Roth, then the government's hands are out of my pocket. Like get out of here. I'm not owing you a dime, and you can't ask for a dime. And the Roth grows tax free, and we all understand and appreciate that. Some people, myself might be included, are a little too eager to get funds over to the Roth because of some nuances there. One nuance is eventually, when you hit in today's tax code, when you hit 70 and a half, what can you utilize your IRA, your traditional IRA for, John Mark?
Well, there's a question in the chat, and I was typing out an answer, and maybe I'll just answer it live as it relates to your question as well too. Is when you think about Roth conversions, what should you never convert to a Roth? Well, there's two things, and maybe Tim, you could think of more, and so please add if you do. But the net present value of your giving for the rest of your life, meaning when I turn 70, whatever I plan on giving to my church, to Samaritan's Purse, to Tunnel for Towers, just all the things that I care about. We had if anybody watches Dave Portnoy on, he's the El Presidente, and a pretty funny guy to watch. He had a nice post of a gentleman yesterday that, served our country and was injured, and I'm sure Tunnel for Towers really helped him. I like giving to that organization because I like supporting the people that have really given a lot to this country, more than just their time and career, but even parts of their body, unfortunately. But to the extent you care about those sort of things, if you have an IRA, those can be given to those charities completely tax-free, meaning you took your IRA and you got a tax-free deduction on the way in whenever you saved in there, or you got an employer match that you never had to pay tax on, and then you got to send it out completely tax-free. And oh, by the way, you still got to take your standard deduction, which is pretty darn big if you're over 65 in today's world, thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is another great video you should watch on our YouTube page about how that can help you in taxes and retirement there. But the net present value you're giving, and then as you think about your estate plan, what part of my balance sheet, what part of my net worth do I want to leave for kingdom purposes? Do you want 100% of it to go to your kids? I mean, if you're talking about retiring and passing away with 7 figures when you consider your house, we'd say some of that probably should go to the things you care about, which, yes, that's your children, that's your grandchildren. But as we say, Proverbs says, a wise man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, and that is not completely monetary. That may be partially monetary, but it's the legacy that you leave. It's hey, more is caught than taught. When I see mom and dad being outrageous givers, when I see mom and dad giving to the point that sometimes it hurts or it drops their net worth, and in a wise way, that's leaving an inheritance to your children's children. They will see that. And so those two things, Tim, those would be things we would say you don't want to convert because you can still get it out completely tax-free. But then when you think about retirement, again, as we talked about, your retirement situation as it relates to taxes is going to be much, much better. You're not going to pay Social Security tax anymore. You're going to pay the FICA taxes. You're probably going to be in lower tax brackets, especially if you actually have a Roth IRA. And so perhaps that's the point you want to think about converting dollars, because you have until the age you retire, that could be 60, 65, all the way out till 73. And it's changing to 75 when the government's going to start forcing dollars out of your pre-tax accounts, which again can be done as these charitable distributions we just talked about earlier there. And so that's a great period of time. As a matter of fact, another popular article we wrote was, how should the pre-retiree, the 60-year-old pre-retiree, think about pre-tax versus Roth contributions? We would say you're so close to retirement, it might be a wise thing, depending on if you've build up Roths before that, to do all those contributions pre-tax. You know why? Because more than likely you're going to have a window from 65 to 75 that you can convert at 10 to 12% tax rates, where if you're over 100 grand of income approximately, you're getting taxed at 22% on your top rate. So everything's nuanced. Everything needs to be looked at as it relates to the entire balance sheet. And the beautiful thing about today's world, Tim, is there's really good software that helps us answer those questions.
That's right.
and
That's right.
there,
Yep.
but the one thing I would say is I would never tell a client to completely eliminate their traditional IRA.
Yep. Yep. I'm going to share my screen here real quick as we wrap up, just to kind of drive home this example here. And I think a question just popped in that caught my eye. If I roll a lot of well, I don't think you can QCD out of a 401k, and to do a qualified charitable distribution that's at age 70 and a half, it has to be in a traditional IRA. And I'm just blown away at the number of people who don't know what a QCD is, and they work with a financial advisor and a tax professional, and neither one of them are talking about it. And I have to say, if that's your case, you got to fire your tax professional, because we always look at that. And like you said, what can you give away right now as a qualified charitable distribution? And second, anything that you're leaving to charities should absolutely be your traditional IRA, because it's going to be taxed anywhere else that it goes. It's going to be taxed to your kids if they inherit it. Whatnot. But real quick, this is a very basic Bill and Betty Tester here. Bill makes $120,000. They're both 60 years old. They're still working. And Bill has a $750,000 401k. He has a $150,000 Roth. And I just wanted to show you some of the things that we looked at. Of course, we build these out with much more detail. But when we're considering traditional versus Roth, or when should I do Roth conversions, these are the key items that we're looking at. First of all, we want to look at their tax brackets and get an understanding of where they're at today. Okay, so Bill and Betty are right in the middle of the 12% tax bracket, and you can see these little blue rectangles here representing their income until retirement. And lo and behold, look what happens in retirement. And this is exactly what you're talking about, John Mark. Why contribute to a Roth IRA and you are paying 12% plus, and maybe if these people were making more, they're paying 22% federal, not to mention what's in state, in taxes, when just a few short years later, there is this huge swath of, they retire, they're not working, their Social Security is coming in now, but this is at a level where their Social Security isn't being taxed very much. So their income or their tax bracket is going to drop significantly here for some time until RMDs kick in. And I ran a quick plan of doing some significant Roth conversions. And that's what's happening here in this plan. They're doing some Roth conversions, taking advantage of those lower tax brackets. And what happens in their total picture over their lifetime, yes, this red represents additional taxes that they're paying, but this gray represents the taxes that they're saving. And their RMDs are a lot less, and they don't have to pay their lower tax brackets. So these folks have saved almost $65,000 in taxes, and their total portfolio has actually increased by $1.1 million. And it's very, to ask the question, is a Roth conversion right, or when should I do a Roth? Well, it depends. It depends on your unique circumstance, your unique information. Everyone's different, and we can help you run those plans for you. Well, I just have to wrap up here. We want to respect your time, and we want to thank you very much for joining us for Retirement Readiness. Hopefully you feel a little bit more ready to retire, or a little bit more energized. If you would like more information, please reach out to us. This is our passion. We love to do it. John Mark's always studying for his next designation that he can use knowledge to apply to your situation, and we'd be honored to help you. Well, keep in touch with us. If it's not personally, yeah, go ahead.
If you work with us as a client today and you're nearing retirement, please, please, please ask us for a copy of What the Happiest Retirees Know. Because what you and I didn't get to talk about today is all the things as it relates to your purpose in retirement. And we would say as your gospel purpose in retirement, which that book is written from a Christian worldview. So if you're close to retirement and you're a client of ours, ask us for a free copy of that book. We will gladly give it to you. It's what we didn't get to talk about today, Tim.
That's right. That's right. Well, we host monthly webinars as well. Keep in touch with our homepage there. We'll be loading up registration for next month's webinar, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great day.